I want you to do something for me right now. Reach into your wallet or your purse, or, I mean, just picture it in your mind.
You just visualize it.
Right, visualize it. Pull out a credit card. Feel the weight of it, you know.
Yeah.
Notice the stiffness of the plastic, the sharp edges, that kind of synthetic sheen it has.
It's a very specific feeling.
It is. Now, I want you to imagine taking that entire credit card, grinding it down into this completely invisible powder, and just injecting it directly into your bloodstream.
Wow.
I know, it sounds like a scene from some dystopian sci-fi movie. But according to the stack of sources we are looking at for today's deep dive, that is actually not fiction. That is your current biological reality.
It really is.
Right now, as you're listening to this, there is roughly a credit card's worth of microplastics circulating inside your body.
It's a deeply uncomfortable visualization, honestly, and, well, it should be. But it is the baseline reality we are all operating from today.
Yeah.
Because for decades, we've thought of plastic pollution as this, external environmental issue.
Like it's happening out there.
Exactly. We pictured it out there, polluting the oceans, clogging up landfills, hurting marine life. But what this new wave of research unequivocally shows is that these plastics have crossed the ultimate barrier.
Meaning us.
Meaning us. They have fundamentally become part of human biology. I mean, we are inhaling them, drinking them, and eating them every single day, largely without even realizing it.
And I know exactly what you, the listener, are feeling right now, because I had that exact same sinking feeling when I first started reading through these sources.
It's a lot to process.
It's an immediate sense of panic, right?
Yeah.
It feels like this overwhelming, inescapable doom. But I want to be crystal clear here. That is not the mission of this deep dive.
Oh, definitely not.
We are not here to produce, like, audio doom scrolling. Today's about a tactical extraction of knowledge. We are going to map out exactly what is happening inside the human body. And, crucially, we're going to look at the hard science of how to use your body's built-in, highly sophisticated defense systems to fight back.
That framing is essential, I think. Because the human body is not just this passive receptacle waiting to be filled with environmental toxins.
Right, we're not just trash cans.
Exactly. It is an incredibly dynamic system. We have these powerful detoxification and elimination pathways that have evolved over millions of years.
Yeah, we have tools.
We do. The core problem we are facing isn't just the presence of synthetic material. It's that modern life is placing this unprecedented metabolic load on these natural systems.
We're just totally overwhelming them.
On a daily basis, yeah. Most of the conversation out there stops at the scary statistics. But the real value, the part that actually matters, is understanding how to practically support and upregulate the body's natural clearance mechanisms.
We have to change the internal environment.
Right, to give our biology a fighting chance.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to effectively deal with something, you first have to understand its size and shape, right? We hear the word microplastics thrown around in the media all the time. But the source material makes a very sharp, very technical distinction between microplastic and nanoplastics. And understanding this difference, it basically completely changes how you view the threat.
The distinction is everything. Biologically speaking, it is the difference between a pebble and like a microscopic speck of dust.
So give us the actual parameters here.
Well, if we look at the parameters, microplastics are typically defined as plastic fragments smaller than 5 millimeters.
So for a visual, 5 millimeters is, what, about the size of a pencil eraser?
Yeah, a pencil eraser or maybe a grain of rice. These are formed when larger consumer goods like plastic bags, water bottles, synthetic textiles, when they degrade.
So they just break apart over time.
Right. They endure mechanical stress, UV radiation from the sun, thermal breakdown. But the crucial point of chemistry here is that plastics do not biodegrade in a traditional sense.
They don't just disappear into the earth.
No, the polymer chains don't return to organic matter. They just shatter. They shatter into increasingly smaller fragments.
Okay, so if a microplastic is like a grain of sand you might accidentally swallow while swimming at the beach,
which happens, sure,
then a nanoplastic is something else entirely. It feels like the scale shifts so dramatically here that our normal intuition about how things move through the body just no longer applies.
That's exactly right, because nanoplastics are measured in nanometers. That's billionths of a meter.
Billions. That's almost hard to even wrap your head around.
It is. We are talking about particles so infinitesimally small that they no longer interact with the body, like a physical object you could see or feel. They operate on a cellular and molecular level.
Wow.
They're small enough to literally pass between cells, enter the bloodstream, and even cross intracellular membranes.
I was trying to conceptualize this while prepping, and the best analogy I could come up with is this. If a microplastic is that grain of sand we talked about, a nanoplastic is like microscopic dust that can just pass right through a chain link fence.
I love that analogy.
And in this scenario, the chain link fence is our body's natural biological barriers, right? Like the gut lining, the skin, the mucous membranes.
The chain link fence analogy works perfectly, because a fence is designed to stop larger intruders, but it is utterly useless against something carried on the wind.
It just blows right through.
Exactly. And to understand the sheer volume of this microscopic dust that we are dealing with, we have to look at one of the most ubiquitous consumer items in modern society.
The plastic water bottle.
The plastic water bottle. The sources highlight some depthly sobering research regarding everyday bottled water, and it really illustrates how these nanoplastics penetrate our lives.
This specific study on bottled water, it completely rewired how I view something so ordinary. Because researchers didn't look at weird, obscure brands, right?
No, they looked at standard plastic water bottles.
The kind you would grab off the shelf at literally any convenience store.
Oh.
And they found that, on average, a single liter of bottled water contained 240,000 plastic particles.
It's a massive number.
240,000 in just 1 liter.
And the breakdown of that number is what really demands our attention. Because of those 240,000 particles, roughly 90% were nanoplastics.
Wait, 90%?
90%. Only 10% were the larger microplastics. So the vast majority of the synthetic material suspended in that water is that microscopic dust you mentioned.
The exact size required to effortlessly breach the chain link fence.
Exactly. To breach human biological barriers.
I just keep doing the math on that in my head. If you drink 2 standard-sized plastic water bottles in a day, which, let's be honest, is practically nothing for someone working out or traveling or just sitting at their desk, you're consuming roughly 500,000 synthetic particles in a single 24-hour period.
Just from the water.
Just from the water.
Which brings us to the core biological issue here, because it is not merely the chemical inertness or toxicity of the plastic itself. It is the sheer unadulterated volume hitting the system all at once.
It's too much traffic for the highway.
Precisely. You have to think of the human body as having processing speeds for clearing foreign material. Very much like a computer has processing speeds for data, or a municipal water plant has a capacity for filtering debris.
Right.
When you ingest 500,000 nanoplastics in a single afternoon, you are essentially launching a biological denial of service attack against your liver and kidneys.
Oh, wow. A biological DDoS attack. That paints a picture.
You are completely overwhelming the body's natural processing speed. It creates this massive bottleneck of foreign material that our cellular machinery simply cannot clear fast enough.
So what does the body do with it?
It's forced to store or embed what it cannot eliminate.
But this naturally leads to a massive question for me. If we are drinking hundreds of thousands of these things a day, if we have a literal credit card's worth of synthetic polymers circulating inside us right now, why does it feel like this is breaking news?
It's a fair question.
Humans have been using plastic heavily since, the 1950s? Why are we just learning the true, horrifying extent of this tissue penetration right now?
That is a phenomenal question, and the answer lies in the limitations of our past scientific technology. The sources point to a landmark 2026 meta-analysis published in the journal Environmental Pollution.
And this wasn't just some small, isolated study, right?
No, not at all. It was a massive undertaking. Researchers analyzed 190 different observations across 11 high-quality data sets. And what's fascinating here is that they proved definitively that our older detection methods were systematically and massively underestimating the microplastic body burden.
Wait, so to be clear, the plastic was always there. It has been accumulating inside us for decades. We were essentially trying to find bacteria using a magnifying glass instead of a microscope.
That is precisely the mechanism of the oversight. Older detection methods relied on spectroscopy and visual identification techniques that simply weren't sensitive enough to resolve particles at the nanometer scale.
We just couldn't see them.
Right. We were successfully finding the microplastics, the grains of sand, but we were entirely blind to the nanoplastics. We simply couldn't see the dust. But recently, there has been a massive leap in automated detection technologies. Specifically, using advanced laser imaging and machine learning algorithms to identify the unique chemical signatures of these polymers at a microscopic level.
So they basically turned the lights on in a dark room.
Exactly. And when they applied this new technology to human solid tissues, the results forced a total paradigm shift.
Because the numbers in the source material are just staggering. This 2026 meta-analysis revealed that the actual concentrations of plastics deeply embedded in solid human tissues are up to 70 times higher than what was previously believed based on the old detection methods.
It's incredible.
And just to emphasize that, not 70% higher.
Yeah.
70 times higher.
It fundamentally rewrites our understanding of human biology's interaction with synthetic environments. It tells us that these particles are far more capable of deeply penetrating and embedding into our solid organs than the scientific community ever thought possible.
We're not just visiting.
No, they aren't just passing through the digestive tract, they are taking up residence.
Okay, if these particles are absolutely everywhere, and they are completely evading our older, cruder biological security checkpoints, we have to trace their path.
We need to see how they get in.
Right. We need to know exactly how they are breaching the body's natural defenses in the first place. And the source material outlines several distinct routes of invasion. The most direct one is obviously ingestion. We just swallow them.
Ingestion is the most heavily documented route for sure, and it is far more pervasive than just drinking from plastic water bottles.
What else are we talking about?
We are consuming these particles unintentionally at almost every meal. The sources highlight several major vectors. Seafood, which obviously accumulates plastics from the ocean environment.
Right.
Table salt, which often contains microfragments from the evaporation of contaminated seawater. And perhaps most significantly, food that has been stored, shipped, or heated in plastic packaging.
So the food supply itself is compromised. But let's look at the mechanics of what happens once it actually goes down the hatch. Because these aren't natural foods. They are foreign synthetic polymers.
Right. When I swallow a piece of nanoplastic, what is actually happening physically as it moves through my digestive tract? So the gastrointestinal tract is lined with this incredibly delicate mucosal barrier. It's designed to absorb nutrients while keeping pathogens and toxins out.
It's the filter.
Exactly. But as these rigid synthetic microfragments move through the GI tract, they cause microscopic physical irritation to that delicate lining. Imagine thousands of microscopic shards of glass just dragging along a highly sensitive tissue.
Ugh, just shredding it on a micro level.
Basically, yeah. This physical scratching and irritation is immediately recognized by the immune system as cellular damage, and that triggers a localized inflammatory response.
And we know from so much other literature we've covered that chronic inflammation in the gut is essentially ground zero for a whole host of downstream autoimmune and metabolic issues. I mean, it compromises the barrier itself, right?
Exactly. The persistent physical irritation leads to chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation degrades the structural integrity of the tight junctions in the gastrointestinal barrier.
The tight junctions are what keep the bad stuff out.
Right. It induces a state of intestinal permeability, which is commonly referred to as leaky gut. When those tight junctions loosen, it not only allows even more nanoplastics to easily slip through the barrier and into the bloodstream.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. It paves the way for other environmental toxins, undigested food proteins, and harmful pathogens to cross over as well. It is a compounding failure of the body's primary defense wall.
That makes complete sense mechanically. You swallow it, it causes microscopic abrasions, the gut inflames, the barrier fails, and the plastics just flood the bloodstream.
Yeah.
But the source material brought up a second route of exposure that genuinely caught me off guard, and that is inhalation. We are literally breathing this stuff in.
Inhalation is perhaps the most insidious vector, really, because it is entirely invisible to us. We are constantly inhaling microplastic particles and synthetic fibers that are suspended in the air.
Like they're just floating around us all the time.
All the time. Because they are so incredibly small and lightweight, they easily become aerosolized. They can remain suspended in indoor and outdoor air currents for days.
I really want to drill down on the indoor aspect of this, because are we talking about our own homes? Like, are the synthetic carpets in my bedroom and the cushions on my living room couch essentially shedding microscopic plastic into the air I breathe while I'm just, sitting there reading a book?
Yes. The built environment is heavily reliant on synthetic textiles. Just think about the composition of modern homes. You have polyester carpets, nylon upholstery, acrylic curtains, and all the fleece and synthetic athletic wear we constantly wear.
Yeah, everything is synthetic now.
Every single time you walk heavily across a synthetic rug or fluff a throw pillow on the couch or even pull a fleece sweater over your head, the friction causes mechanical breakdown.
So it's just kicking up a cloud of plastic.
You are aerosolizing thousands of synthetic microfibers straight into the air column you are actively breathing.
That is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
I'm literally breathing in the degradation of my own furniture.
It's a bizarre thought.
It is. But how does the body handle that? Because the lungs have defense mechanisms, don't they?
They do. The respiratory tract is lined with mucus and cilia to trap and sweep out larger debris. But nanoplastics are so small, they bypass those upper respiratory defenses entirely.
You just slip right past the guards.
Right. They travel deep into the alveolar space. Those are the tiny air sacs where actual gas exchange occurs.
Okay, so they're deep in the lungs now.
Once they deposit in the deep lung tissue, the local immune cells, which are called alveolar macrophages, attempt to engulf and destroy them.
Like they would a bacteria or a virus.
Exactly. But because plastic cannot be broken down by biological enzymes, the macrophages fail. And this leads to a phenomenon known as frustrated phagocytosis.
Frustrated phagocytosis. I've never heard that term before, but it sounds like the immune cell is literally just exhausting itself trying to eat something indestructible.
That is a very accurate way to describe it. The immune cell continuously releases inflammatory cytokines and oxidative chemicals in a desperate attempt to break down the plastic. But it can't.
So it just keeps firing.
It keeps firing, which ends up severely damaging the surrounding healthy lung tissue instead.
Oh, wow. So the immune system basically attacks the lungs trying to get to the plastic.
Precisely. Over time, depending on the exposure load, this chronic localized oxidative stress can lead to diminished lung capacity, persistent respiratory irritation, and as the inflammation becomes systemic, it contributes to broader cardiovascular disease.
So we are eating it, and the gut barrier fails. We are breathing it, and the lung tissue inflames. But the body has one ultimate physical shield, right? The skin.
The largest organ.
Right. Which brings us to the third route, dermal absorption. And for a long time, I just thought the skin was pretty much an impenetrable fortress unless you had a physical cut.
And you'd be right for most things. The skin's outermost layer, the stratum corneum, is indeed a formidable barrier against larger environmental hazards. For larger microplastics, the skin remains a highly effective shield. The particles just sit on the surface and are washed away.
But I'm guessing the rules change for nanoplastics.
Once again, the physics change entirely when we zoom into the nanoscale. The source material explicitly points out that nanoplastics, specifically those under 100 nanometers in diameter, are capable of penetrating right through the dermal layer.
But how? The skin is made of tightly packed cells. How does a synthetic particle just burrow through intact skin?
It exploits the body's natural anatomical openings. Because the skin is not a solid sheet of armor, it is highly porous. It contains millions of sweat glands and hair follicles.
Right.
These hair follicles in particular act as natural microtunnels that bypass the dense outer layer of the epidermis and lead deep into the dermal tissue, which is heavily rich in blood vessels.
It's a direct pathway.
It is. Furthermore, plastics are highly lipophilic, meaning they love fat and oil. The hair follicles are lined with sebaceous glands producing sebum, an oily substance. The nanoplastics are naturally drawn into these oily microtunnels, allowing them to just slip past the outer defenses. And of course, any microdamage to the skin, a tiny scrape, a patch of dry eczema, or microscopic tears from shaving provides an entirely unimpeded open door.
That is wild. The idea that we use our own hair follicles and oils as an express lane into the bloodstream. And where are we primarily getting this dermal exposure? Is it just from, like, touching plastic objects throughout the day?
Direct contact with contaminated environments plays a role, sure, but a massive source of dermal exposure comes directly from the cosmetics and personal care industry.
Of course it does.
For years, many lotions, facial scrubs, and cosmetics intentionally used microplastics as cheap exfoliants or texturizing agents.
The little microbeads.
Exactly. Even as regulations change on those, the plastic containers that house these creams and serums continuously leach nanoplastics directly into the product. When you rub that lotion into your skin, you are mechanically forcing these nanoplastics into your pores and hair follicles.
Okay, so we've mapped out the breaches. They tear through the gut lining. They deposit deep in the alveolar sacs of the lungs, and they literally tunnel through our hair follicles.
Yes.
But this is where the story shifts from a localized problem to a systemic crisis because they don't just stay in the gut or the skin, they migrate.
Systemic migration is where the true long-term gravity of this biological crisis reveals itself.
Because they're in the blood now.
Right. Once these nanoplastics cross the initial barriers and enter the bloodstream, they treat the human circulatory system like an open highway. This allows them to travel to and embed within our most vital, highly perfused organs.
And the sources list the destinations. And honestly, it reads like a cascade of worst-case scenarios. They are migrating to the liver, the lungs, the kidneys, the brain.
All the major filtration and command centers.
Exactly. But then there's a specific 2026 review in the Journal of Human Reproduction that zeroes in on something that I think completely shifts the weight of this entire conversation.
It really does, because if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is no longer just about an individual's personal health risks or chronic inflammation.
No.
The 2026 Human Reproduction Review confirmed, through high-resolution tissue analysis, that micro and nanoplastics are now widely detectable in the placenta, the testes, human semen, ovaries, and follicular fluid.
They are penetrating the reproductive tissues, the very foundational building blocks of human life.
Yes. They are accumulating in the exact tissues responsible for the continuation of our species. And the documented physiological side effects of this accumulation are profound.
What exactly is happening in those tissues?
The sources detail how the presence of these foreign polymers in these highly sensitive tissues induces severe oxidative stress, widespread systemic inflammation, and critical endocrine disruption.
Let's pause on endocrine disruption for a second, because that means these plastics are actually interfering with our hormonal signaling, right? How does a piece of literal plastic trick the body's hormone system?
It comes down to a concept called molecular mimicry. Many of the chemical additives used in the manufacturing of plastics, like bisphenols and phthalates, have molecular structures that closely resemble human hormones, particularly estrogen.
So they look like hormones to the body.
Exactly. When these plastics embed in reproductive tissues, these chemicals can bind to the body's natural hormone receptors. They either aggressively stimulate them or they block the natural hormones from binding.
That's like a fake key fitting into the lock.
That's a perfect way to put it. This sends chaotic, false signals throughout the endocrine system, disrupting fertility, development, and cellular regulation. The sources even note that the resulting oxidative stress can lead to direct DNA damage.
DNA damage. The physical presence of synthetic waste is actively damaging our genetic material.
It is.
But as objectively bad as the plastic polymer itself is, the source material introduces a mechanical concept that makes this situation infinitely worse. They call it the Trojan horse effect.
The Trojan horse mechanism is perhaps the most crucial concept to grasp if you want to understand the true toxicity of nanoplastics.
Because it's not just the plastic.
Right. The plastic particles are biologically harmful on their own due to the physical scratching and immune irritation we discussed earlier, but the critical realization is that they do not travel alone.
Okay, unpack that.
Because of their chemical structure, nanoplastics are incredibly efficient at absorbing and concentrating other toxins from the environment.
So if I'm understanding this, the plastic particle itself is bad, but it's really acting like a microscopic sponge that has been dipped in poison.
Yes.
It's essentially smuggling the absolute worst environmental toxins right past our biological security checkpoints and delivering them deep into our organs.
That is the exact mechanism. Due to molecular forces like van der Waals interactions and their high surface area to volume ratio, nanoplastics act as powerful magnets for heavy metals.
Which ones specifically?
The sources specifically single out mercury, cadmium, and lead. Furthermore, they bind aggressively to persistent organic pollutants, commonly referred to as POPs.
POPs. I think we need to define that clearly for the listener. What exactly are persistent organic pollutants and why are they so dangerous?
Persistent organic pollutants are highly toxic, complex synthetic chemicals, things like polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs.
Where do those even come from?
They are usually the toxic byproducts of industrial manufacturing, chemical pesticides, or high-heat combustion. They earn the name persistent because their chemical bonds are so incredibly strong that they virtually never break down in the natural environment.
They just stick around forever.
Forever. And they are highly toxic known carcinogens. So you have a situation where a nanoplastic acts as a highly efficient transport vehicle, carrying a concentrated payload of mercury, lead, and carcinogenic industrial chemicals directly into human tissue, deep into the liver, the brain, or the ovaries.
So when that plastic embeds in the liver, it doesn't just sit there inertly, it starts unloading its cargo.
Exactly.
The body's immune system isn't just fighting a physical piece of plastic, it's fighting a brutal two-front war.
You have the physical toxicity, the mechanical irritation, and the frustrated phagocytosis we talked about happening simultaneously with the chemical toxicity of the heavy metals and POPs leaching out of the plastic and poisoning the surrounding cellular environment.
It's just a compounding, multi-layered biological assault.
It really is.
Right. So, just take a breath for a second. If you are listening to this right now, maybe you're on your commute or walking the dog or making breakfast, I know how incredibly bleak this sounds.
It can feel very heavy.
It feels like the air we breathe and the water we drink are fundamentally compromised.
Yeah.
But remember, the mission we established at the very beginning of this deep dive, you are listening to this to become well-informed and, more importantly, empowered.
Absolutely.
So we're going to pivot right now. We are transitioning from diagnosing the problem to mapping out the solutions.
Yeah.
Because the human body is an absolute engineering marvel.
It really is.
It possesses highly sophisticated, built-in elimination systems designed to purge toxins.
Yeah.
We just have to understand the biology well enough to know how to activate them.
And that is the most vital takeaway from all of this research. The data clearly shows that while there is no single magic pill, no rapid detox cleanse that will completely clear all plastics from your tissue overnight.
Right, you can't just drink a green juice and fix it.
No, but implementing specific biologically targeted lifestyle interventions can dramatically reduce your total body burden. By working with the body's natural physiological design, we can limit ongoing exposure and heavily upregulate our clearance mechanisms.
So let's get into the defense protocol. The very first step, the absolute baseline requirement before we even talk about detoxifying the body, is cutting the source.
This step is non-negotiable. You have to radically reduce your daily exposure to incoming microplastics. None of the internal clearance strategies we are going to explore will matter if you are continuously massively reloading the system every single day.
Right.
It is the biological equivalent of frantically trying to bail water out of a sinking boat without first taking a moment to plug the hole in the hull.
So what does this all mean for the listener on a Tuesday morning? How do we practically cut the source in a modern world made of plastic? Let's start with the water, since we spend so much time discussing the sheer volume, the 240,000 particles found in standard bottled water.
The most immediate and impactful intervention you can make is to filter your daily drinking water at the point of use.
So at the tap.
Yes. The sources cite a highly relevant 2023 peer-reviewed study from researchers at the University of Toronto that looked specifically at the efficacy of household water filtration systems.
And what did they find?
They found that standard carbon pitcher filters, the ones most people have in their fridge, are somewhat helpful, but point-to-point membrane-based technologies, specifically reverse osmosis systems, are incredibly effective at halting this microplastic flood.
I know reverse osmosis is popular. You hear about RO water all the time. But how effective is it really against something as small as a nanoplastic?
The Toronto study demonstrated that these reverse osmosis systems can remove anywhere from 78% to 100% of micro and nanoplastics from drinking water.
Wow.
It is a staggering reduction in your daily exposure.
Up to 100%. That's massive. But how does reverse osmosis actually achieve that? Is it chemically neutralizing the plastic somehow?
No. It is a purely mechanical process, which is why it's so reliable. A reverse osmosis system forces tap water through extremely fine, semi-permeable membranes.
Okay.
The microscopic pores in these membranes are so unimaginably small, often measuring a fraction of a nanometer, that they physically exclude the vast majority of contaminants.
So the water gets through, but nothing else.
Exactly. The water molecules, which are tiny, can easily pass through the pores. But the nanoplastics, along with heavy metals and other larger chemical compounds, hit that physical wall and are flushed away down the drain. You are essentially setting up an artificial biological barrier before the water even enters your body.
Okay, so installing a reverse osmosis filter for your daily drinking water is a highly actionable, high-impact step. We plug that hole in the boat?
Yeah.
What about food? The source material specifically zeroes in on food storage and the preparation process.
This is an area where people inadvertently dose themselves with massive amounts of plastic and chemical additives. The most critical piece of advice from the literature is this: you must stop heating food in plastic containers or trays.
Period.
Period.
Well,
If you take a plastic Tupperware container or a frozen meal resting in a plastic tray and put it in the microwave, you are creating a chemical nightmare.
and this is purely because of the thermal stress, right?
Yeah.
The heat itself is breaking the plastic down.
Exactly. Heat fundamentally alters the structural integrity of the polymer chains. When you microwave plastic, it accelerates two distinct forms of contamination.
Which are?
First is thermal degradation, meaning the heat causes the plastic to physically break down and shed millions of nanoplastic particles directly into your food.
Right into the meal.
Second is chemical leaching. The heat acts as a catalyst, releasing all the chemical plasticizers like BPA, BPS, and phthalates, along with any Trojan horse toxins, straight into the meal you are about to eat.
But let me push back on this a little bit, because practically speaking, this is incredibly difficult to avoid in modern life.
Yeah.
Almost everything at the grocery store comes wrapped in plastic. Even if I diligently refuse to microwave it, my chicken, my vegetables, my snacks, they're all sitting in plastic on the shelf for days or weeks.
That pushback is entirely valid. Modern society makes absolute zero exposure completely impossible.
It's everywhere.
It is. But remember the framework we established. The goal is not perfection. The goal is lowering the total toxic burden over time so your body's systems aren't overwhelmed. You can't control the industrial supply chain,
Right.
but you absolutely can control what you cook with and what you store your leftovers in at home. It is about migrating your kitchen away from synthetics. You switch your storage to glass containers, you use stainless steel pans and bowls, you utilize ceramics.
They don't break down.
Right. These materials are incredibly stable and do not degrade into your food under thermal stress.
And what about the actual food choices? The source mentions ultra-processed foods as a specific vector.
The recommendation is to heavily minimize ultra-processed foods that come heavily wrapped in layers of plastic packaging. Aside from the fact that the ingredients in ultra-processed foods promote systemic inflammation on their own, microplastics actively migrate from the packaging into the food during transport and storage.
Even without heat.
Even without heat. And the chemistry of the food plays a huge role here. This migration is drastically accelerated if the food is highly acidic, like tomato sauces, or very fatty, like cheeses or processed meats.
Oh, wow. Why is that?
Acid and fat act as highly effective natural solvents for plastic chemicals. They literally pull the lipophilic toxins right out of the plastic wrapper and integrate them into the cellular structure of the food.
Okay, so we filter our tap water with reverse osmosis. We strictly forbid microwaving plastic. We switch to glass and stainless steel storage. And we try to buy whole foods with less plastic packaging.
What about the air? We talked about the terrifying reality of our living room couches and synthetic carpets shedding microscopic fibers with every step.
For indoor air quality, the intervention is remarkably straightforward,
Right?
but highly effective. Utilize HEPA air filtration.
That's HEPA, right? Yes, HEPA stands for High Efficiency Particulate Air, because indoor air is relatively stagnant and continuously accumulates those microscopic synthetic fibers we constantly aerosolize. Running a true HEPA filter in the rooms where you spend the vast majority of your time, specifically your bedroom while you sleep or your home office, can capture a massive percentage of those airborne particles.
It grabs them before we breathe them in.
Exactly, before they have a chance to reach your alveolar macrophages.
All right, so we've successfully addressed the incoming flood. We've plugged the major holes in the boat. We are no longer reloading our biology with hundreds of thousands of new particles every single day. But that still leaves the massive issue of the credit card's worth of plastic that is already circulating inside us.
The existing burden.
Right. How do we get it out? This brings us to the second major phase of the defense protocol, which revolves around gut mechanics and sweating. Let's start with the gut.
The gastrointestinal tract is paramount to this entire process. It is both the primary entry point for ingestion and the primary exit point for microplastics that are moving through the body but haven't yet deeply embedded into solid organ tissues.
So it's the main highway out.
It is. The fundamental biological mandate here is incredibly simple but often ignored. You have to keep your gut moving. Transit time is everything.
Right, because if waste sits stagnant in the gut, those toxins have more time to cause localized inflammation or just get reabsorbed into the bloodstream.
Exactly.
So how do we mechanically force these plastics out through the GI tract?
It comes down to very specific targeted dietary inclusions. You need to consistently incorporate soluble fibers into your daily diet.
Any specific kinds?
The sources specifically highlight ground flaxseed, chia seeds, and psyllium husk as excellent interventions.
Why soluble fiber specifically? Like, what is the actual mechanism of action happening inside the intestines when I eat a spoonful of chia seeds?
Soluble fiber has a very unique physical property. When it encounters water in the digestive tract, it doesn't just pass through intact. It dissolves and forms a thick, highly viscous, gel-like substance.
Like a spongy gel.
Yes. And as this dense gel slowly moves through the intestines, it acts almost like biological quicksand. It binds to foreign particles, including freely circulating microplastics and heavy metals, and physically traps them within its matrix.
Well, that's brilliant.
It creates substantial bulk in the stool, ensuring that these trapped particles are forcibly swept through the digestive tract and completely excreted from the body.
But the sources go even deeper into the biological mechanics here, specifically regarding something called the gallbladder and bile cycle. I found this absolutely fascinating because mechanically connects our daily digestion directly to our liver's detoxification pathways. Can you walk us through exactly how eating fat and protein connects to getting rid of plastic waste?
Absolutely. This is where human biology reveals its absolute brilliance. It's a process called enterohepatic circulation.
Enterohepatic circulation.
Yes. When you consume a meal that contains healthy fats and proteins, those specific macronutrients trigger the release of a hormone in the gut that sends a chemical signal directly to your gallbladder.
And the gallbladder is right near the liver, right?
Right. It's a small, hollow organ nestled under your liver, and its primary job is to store and concentrate bile.
And bile is produced by the liver, which is the body's main filtration and detoxification plant.
Correct. The liver constantly filters your blood. When it identifies toxic waste, including circulating microplastics, heavy metals, and metabolic byproducts, it grabs those toxins and packages them into the bile.
Okay, I'm following.
So follow the sequence. You eat fat and protein, the hormone signals the gallbladder vigorously contracts, and it squeezes that bile, which is heavily laden with the liver's packaged toxic waste, directly into the small intestine to help digest the fats you just ate.
Okay, so the toxic waste is successfully out of the liver, but now it's just sitting in the small intestine. It's still inside the body.
Yes. And this is exactly where the soluble fiber comes in to play its most crucial role. That viscous, gel-like fiber physically encounters the toxic bile in the small intestine.
It grabs it.
It binds to the bile acids. It essentially captures the waste and holds onto it tightly, preventing it from interacting with the intestinal wall. The fiber then ferries that bile and all the plastic and chemical waste it carries completely out of the body when you go to the bathroom.
So, to use an analogy, soluble fiber is essentially the bouncer at a nightclub.
I like where this is going.
The liver is the manager who flags the toxic waste as a problem. The bile acts like these security guards who carry the troublemaker out of the VIP room and down to the front door. But if the bouncer isn't standing there at the door to physically throw them out into the street, what happens?
If the bouncer isn't there, the system catastrophically fails. If you skip meals, or more importantly, if your diet is completely devoid of soluble fiber, the biological mechanism breaks down.
Because there's nothing to catch the bile.
Exactly. Without the fiber gel to trap it, that toxic bile reaches the end of the small intestine and is simply reabsorbed through the intestinal wall. It recirculates right back into your bloodstream and returns to the liver.
The troublemaker sneaks right back into the party.
Right back into the party.
That is a massive, crucial warning. If you don't have the soluble fiber to bind the waste, your body is just endlessly recycling its own poison, adding to the burden rather than reducing it. Keep the gut moving with fiber.
It's foundational.
Okay, moving on from the gut. We need to address the Trojan horse effect we talked about earlier. How do we get rid of the heavy metals and the persistent organic pollutants? The sources point heavily to sweating.
Exactly. Sweating is a robust, established, scientifically validated route for the human body to excrete heavy metals and lipophilic chemicals like persistent organic pollutants.
And we know plastics carry those.
Since we know definitively that nanoplastics act as transport vehicles, those Trojan horses, for these exact same carcinogenic chemicals, there is immense biological plausibility that forced sweating will help pull those co-transported toxins out of your deep tissues.
I really want to understand the how here. Like, if a piece of nanoplastic has successfully smuggled heavy metals into my fat cells or my tissues, how does sitting in a hot room actually mobilize that poison and get it into my sweat?
It relies on hemodynamics and the mobilization of lipophilic substances. When you engage in regular dry sauna use, the intense heat dramatically increases your core body temperature.
Naturally.
In response, your heart rate elevates and your blood vessels heavily dilate. This massively increases blood flow to your skin and your adipose or fat tissue.
Okay.
Many of these persistent organic pollutants and heavy metals are stored in fat cells because they are lipophilic. The heat and the increased microcirculation essentially agitate and mobilize these toxins, pulling them out of the fat cells into the interstitial fluid, into the bloodstream, and finally pushing them out through the sweat glands.
So even if the physical piece of plastic is deeply embedded in my tissue and won't physically budge, I can at least drain the poison it brought with it.
That is exactly the goal. You are neutralizing the chemical payload. By forcing the body into a state of heavy, prolonged perspiration, the toxic cargo, the mercury, the cadmium, the PCBs can be mobilized and sweated out. You are dramatically reducing the chemical toxicity even if the inert plastic particle itself remains behind.
Now, the sources include a very serious caveat here about heavy sauna use and sweating, don't they?
Yes, and it is absolutely vital for listener safety. Sweating protocols must be viewed as a supporting intervention, not a primary standalone strategy.
You can't just sweat it all out and ignore everything else.
Right. And when you sweat heavily in a sauna for 20 or 30 minutes, you aren't just selectively losing water and toxins, you are rapidly depleting your body of essential minerals and electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium.
Which you need to survive.
Exactly. Any intense sauna protocol must be immediately followed by rigorous fluid and mineral rehydration. If you aggressively sweat out your electrolytes without replacing them, you risk severe dehydration, cardiovascular strain, and you actually impair the kidney's ability to function properly. You end up doing more harm than good.
Okay, so we've covered a tremendous amount of ground. We plugged the incoming hole with water filters and glass containers. We learned how to flush the system by using fiber to bind the toxic bile. And we talked about mobilizing the heavy metals through intense sweating.
It's a solid protocol so far.
But now we reach the final frontier, the most complex phase of the defense protocol, brain clearance and cellular defense. Because, as terrifying as it was to read, the sources confirm these nanoplastics are successfully crossing the blood-brain barrier.
They are.
How on earth do we clean out our own brains?
For a long time, neuroscience didn't fully understand how the brain cleared its waste because it lacks a traditional lymphatic system like the rest of the body. But we now know we relied on the brain's highly specialized built-in wash cycle, which is known as the glymphatic network.
The glymphatic network. Not lymphatic with an L, but glymphatic with a G. What exactly is it?
Correct. Glymphatic. It's named because it relies heavily on glial cells, specifically astrocytes. It is a macroscopic waste clearance system dedicated entirely to the central nervous system.
So how does it operate?
Well, during the day, while you are awake and processing information, metabolic waste, malformed proteins, and environmental toxins accumulate in the interstitial fluid between your brain cells. It's just the natural byproduct of a working brain.
Just generating garbage all day.
Right. But at night, the glymphatic system activates.
How does it actually clean the tissue? Like physically?
It's an incredible mechanical process. The glial cells actually shrink slightly, which dramatically widens the interstitial spaces between your brain cells.
So it opens up the channels?
Yes. Once the space is widened, cerebrospinal fluid, the clear fluid that surrounds your brain and spinal cord, rapidly pulses and circulates deep through the brain tissue. It is essentially power washing the cells, flushing out all the accumulated metabolic waste and potentially foreign nanoplastics, pushing them back into the circulatory system to be filtered by the liver.
And the source material is incredibly specific about when this power washing happens. It doesn't just happen because your eyes are closed.
No, and this raises a profoundly important question about how our modern lifestyle is impacting our neurological health.
Let's hear it.
The glymphatic network is not active at all times. It is dramatically, exponentially more active during slow-wave, deep, non-REM sleep.
Deep sleep.
Right. If you are tossing and turning, if you are stuck in light sleep, or if you are heavily sleep-deprived, your brain is simply not getting washed, period. The anatomical space between the cells doesn't widen and the fluid doesn't flush.
Think about the implications of that for a second. We always think of sleep deprivation as just making us tired or cranky or maybe a bit forgetful at work. But mechanically, sleep deprivation is literally stopping your brain from taking out the plastic trash.
It's accumulating.
You're generating garbage all day
Yeah.
and then just leaving the garbage bags to rot in your living room.
Yeah.
So what is the highly actionable advice here? How do we ensure we hit that deep sleep?
The biological requirement is 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. But as you noted, it's not just about the duration of time spent in bed, it is about sleep architecture and quality. To achieve that slow wave, restorative, non-REM sleep, where the glymphatic system reaches maximum efficiency, you must aggressively optimize your physical sleeping environment.
Give us a checklist.
First, the room must be as quiet as possible to prevent microarousals. Second, it must be pitch dark. Any ambient light from screens, charging cables, or street lamps hitting your retina disrupts melatonin production.
Okay, quiet and dark. What else?
And crucially, it must be thermally optimized. The body's core temperature needs to drop to initiate deep sleep. So the optimal room temperature range for promoting glymphatic activation is between 65 and 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
65 to 68 degrees, dark, quiet, and cold.
Wow.
That is the exact environmental formula you need to turn on the brain's power washer. It's amazing how a physiological detox connects directly to, like, the thermostat in your hallway.
It really is all connected.
Okay, the very last step in the defense protocol deals with the smallest scale possible, the cellular level, supporting your hepatic and antioxidant pathways.
This is where we have to address the long-term chronic reality of this issue. Once nanoplastics are deeply embedded in solid organ tissue woven into the fibers of the liver, the kidneys, or the reproductive organs, behavioral interventions like eating fiber or sweating in a sauna are highly unlikely to physically dislodge them.
They're just stuck there.
They are structurally in there. However, the biological damage they cause while they are present is driven by oxidative stress, and that is a process we can heavily modify.
Meaning, we can't necessarily reach in and remove the microscopic plastic shrapnel from the tissue, but we can fundamentally stop that shrapnel from continuously wounding and degrading the healthy cells around it.
Precisely. And this matters immensely for your long-term health trajectory and longevity. When a foreign particle sits permanently in human tissue, the immune system constantly attacks it. This creates chronic, localized oxidative stress.
It's just a constant battle.
It generates massive amounts of harmful free radicals, these unstable molecules that aggressively steal electrons from surrounding tissues. This damages cellular DNA and destroys mitochondria, which are the powerhouses that give your cells energy.
So how do we stop the free radicals?
To fight this relentless oxidative fire, the body relies on its master antioxidant defense system, which is centered around a molecule called glutathione.
Glutathione. I hear that word constantly in the biohacking, longevity, and functional medicine spaces. It gets thrown around like a buzzword all the time. What exactly is it on a biochemical level?
Glutathione is a tripeptide, meaning it's built from 3 amino acids, and it is arguably the body's most crucial endogenous antioxidant defense.
Endogenous just means we make it ourselves, right?
Endogenous simply means your body produces it internally. It is so vital to human survival that it resides in high concentrations in every single living cell in your body, with the highest concentrations found in the liver, your primary detox organ.
How does it actually protect the cells?
Its mechanism of action is elegant. It voluntarily donates an electron to neutralize those destructive free radicals, stopping them from tearing apart your DNA. It protects the mitochondria from irreversible damage, and it heavily supports the liver's broader cellular repair and detoxification systems.
But the problem we were running into, according to the sources, is one of supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
Because we have all these nanoplastics embedded in us, creating constant 247 oxidative stress. Our bodies are burning through our natural glutathione reserves significantly faster than we can natively reproduce it.
Exactly. Microplastic exposure disproportionately increases the body's metabolic demand for glutathione. Your immune system is fighting a constant, low-grade biological fire in multiple organs simultaneously, and eventually the fire department simply runs out of water.
And when that happens?
When glutathione is depleted, cellular aging accelerates and organ function degrades.
So how do you and I actually get more of this glutathione? How do we rapidly restock the reserves and give our cells the ammunition they need?
While you can take direct glutathione supplements, they often struggle with bioavailability, meaning the gut breaks them down before they even reach the cells.
Oh, so popping a glutathione pill isn't necessarily the best route.
The most effective, scientifically backed strategy is to give the body the exact raw materials it needs to synthesize glutathione natively inside the cell.
Give it the building blocks.
Exactly. The source material outlines clear dietary and supplemental interventions to achieve this. First, you can supplement with N-acetylcysteine, commonly known as NAC. Right. NSE provides the amino acid cysteine, which is the rate-limiting building block your body desperately needs to produce glutathione. By supplementing NSE, you remove the bottleneck in production.
Okay, an NSE supplement is a very direct, easy intervention. What about utilizing food as medicine here?
Diet is arguably more critical because it provides a sustained supply of building blocks. You must consume adequate, high-quality dietary protein to supply the necessary amino acids. Specifically, you need to focus on sulfur-rich foods.
Why sulfur?
Because the sulfur molecule is the active site on glutathione that allows it to neutralize toxins. Cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and cauliflower are phenomenal sources of this dietary sulfur.
Easy enough to add to dinner.
Furthermore, they contain a compound called sulforaphane, which actually signals your DNA to ramp up the production of your own internal antioxidant enzymes.
And the sources also heavily mention polyphenols in this context.
Yes, incorporating polyphenol-rich foods provides robust, broad-spectrum antioxidant and anti-inflammatory support that works synergistically right alongside glutathione.
What are the best sources for those?
This means generously incorporating high-quality, cold-pressed olive oil, eating plenty of dark berries like wild blueberries, and drinking organic green tea. These specific foods contain compounds that directly target and soothe the inflammatory pathways triggered by the plastic embedding in your tissues.
Okay, let's pull all the way back, take a breath, and look at the massive landscape we've mapped out today. We started in a very dark, deeply uncomfortable place. The 2026 data is, frankly, terrifying.
It's a harsh reality check.
The fact that the old detection methods were completely missing the invisible dust, the sheer volume of 240,000 particles in a single water bottle, the harrowing realization that these nanoplastics are successfully breaching the blood-brain barrier and heavily penetrating our reproductive systems, it is a remarkably heavy burden to process.
Absolutely.
But the overarching dominant message of this deep dive, drawn straight from the biological science and the sources, is one of profound empowerment.
I completely agree with that. We are absolutely not helpless victims of our environment as long as we choose to proactively adapt to it. It is true that you cannot eliminate every single trace of synthetic plastic from your modern life, and no single intervention we discuss today is expected to miraculously reverse decades of bioaccumulation overnight.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
But what makes this defense framework so incredibly valuable is that it respects, understands, and utilizes the profound clearance systems the human body has evolved over millions of years.
It's about compounding small biological victories. You install a reverse osmosis system to filter your tap water, and you firmly stop microwaving plastic containers to stem the tide of incoming toxins.
Plug the holes.
Right. You prioritize a dark, cold, 65-degree bedroom to ensure your brain can power wash itself through the glymphatic system while you sleep. You eat soluble fiber like chia and flax to act as a bouncer, binding the toxic bile and sweeping the waste completely out of your digestive tract.
Exactly.
You utilize dry saunas to mobilize and sweat out the heavy metals. And you eat sulfur-rich, cruciferous vegetables and take NAC to arm your cells with the glutathione they need to fight the oxidative stress. You aren't fighting nature. You are actively working with human biology, moving it forcefully in the direction it was always designed to go.
You start overwhelming the system with unforced errors, and you start vigorously supporting its natural capacity to heal. It is a highly pragmatic, science-based approach to surviving and thriving in a modern environmental crisis.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought to chew on. Something that really stuck with me as we were analyzing the implications of these sources. We know, based on the high-resolution tissue analysis in that 2026 Human Reproduction Review, that these nanoplastics are actively and heavily penetrating the placenta, the testes, and the follicular fluid.
They are completely infiltrating the reproductive core.
Right. And it made me think, if these synthetic particles are present at the very biological foundation of human reproduction, it means we aren't just accumulating our own environmental waste over the course of our individual lifespan.
No, we're passing it on.
We are actively passing a baseline burden of synthetic lipophilic material to the next generation at the exact moment of conception. The next generation is being born with the credit card already in their system.
It is a profound, incredibly unsettling biological reality that forces us to look beyond our own health.
Which raises this fascinating, almost sci-fi question. Are we currently witnessing, in real time, a forced mass evolutionary event?
Oh, wow.
I mean, for hundreds of thousands of years, the human body adapted and evolved in response to natural organic threats, bacterial viruses, prolonged famine, shifting climates, predators. But in just the last 70 years, we have fundamentally, perhaps permanently, altered the chemical and structural makeup of our internal biological environment. Is the human body currently being forced to adapt to a synthetic, plastic-laden world?
It's a massive selective pressure.
Right. And if our species survives this massive metabolic bottleneck thousands of years from now, will human biology have evolved entirely new enzymatic metabolic pathways, specifically designed to digest, break down, and natively excrete plastic polymers? Will we evolve to become naturally plastic resistant?
It is the ultimate biological question of adaptation. Biology at its core always ruthlessly seeks a way to survive and find equilibrium. But the brutal truth of evolution is that the transition period, the centuries it takes for those genetic adaptations to take hold, is where the greatest vulnerability and loss lies.
Something heavy but fascinating to mull over while you're drinking from your glass of reverse osmosis filtered water. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you feel a little more armed, a little more capable, and a lot more informed. Stay curious, stay proactive, and above all, respect your biology. We'll catch you on the next one.